success, real success. So we have to bring somebody on that knows about this kind of success. Andrew Brandt, former NFL executive. He's executive director of the Murad Center at Villanova. And you should join his newsletter, mysunday7.com, mysunday, and then the number 7.com. Mr. Andrew Brandt on the Comcast Business Hotline. How are you today, Andrew?
Tyrone, I'm doing well. You know, I'm, as you know, I kind of favor the Packers, having worked there 12 years, but did some consulting with the Eagles and married into an Eagles family. So I'm certainly happy as everyone is, and I've kind of called this for a while. I just think they're such a talented team, and now they have an opportunity to prove it again.
You know, that's what I want to have you on. You know how difficult this is. You know the ins and outs, and you know where they were a year ago, and you look at how they are now. So before I get into some of the things you saw early on, I mean October, when the teams maybe 4-2, while you were talking about how good they were, could you talk about just how monumental a task it was to kind of come back from last year and then rebuild the roster and rebuild the coaching staff in 1 year and then get to this point?
Yeah, you know, I think that some people don't understand that the NFL, like a lot of sports leagues, is really baked into competitive balance. Everything is trying to keep good teams from staying good and bad teams making it easy for them to get better. The draft, of course, everyone knows about, the free agency restraints, and, of course, the cap. And I worked the cap for many years, and I really admire teams like the Eagles and a few others that just consistently have sustained success with cap issues and are able to sort of put the team together without regard to worrying about money issues and contract issues, and they seem to make it happen. I think what this team has done is amazing. Even a year ago, when they were a good team that obviously fell apart late, they identified the weaknesses and addressed them. And when I talk about the cap, of course, one thing that is outside of the cap that is easy to understand is coaching and have money paid for coaching. And I think there were deficiencies last year at the coordinator positions, which they addressed. And maybe they addressed it with strong contracts that go outside the cap. I can only imagine what they're paying Vic Fangio. It's just he's an elite defensive coordinator, and he's made a huge difference. And I think I said, yeah, that was the biggest signing in the NFL in the offseason, player or anything else. Just made a huge difference. And whatever they're paying him, he's worth it, and it's outside the cap. Obviously, they're going against the same thing with Kansas City, an extraordinary defensive coordinator that I'm sure is making millions of dollars, again, outside the cap. But back to the Eagles. What did they want to address? They wanted to address have an elite running game. They got the guy. They wanted to address the secondary. They got two guys that, barring injury, could be there for years and years. They wanted to address outside linebacker, and they transformed an average player into a Pro Bowl superstar player. Some of that is finding a diamond in the rough that wasn't used right, and some of that is, as I said, superior coaching from Fangio and their staff. I'm biased. I admit it. I've known Howie for, 20-something years. I live here. I understand it. But I just think this is a stacked team. And they have done what, I know people get frustrated with it, but they do what these teams do that are elite. They play poorly at times, yet always win. And they put it together yesterday in a blowout, but I just think there's still a level this team can go. It's just stacked. And when people talk about personnel, when they're among scouting staffs in the NFL, you look around and you say, where's their weakness? Where do we attack, offensively, defensively? Really hard to find on this team. Really hard to find.
All right. Ty said even early on the season, you had a tweet out there on November 10th of last year.
Yeah.
I think everyone except the Eagles fans thinks that the Eagles are a Super Bowl contender. How did you know that early? What did you envision?
I mean, it's kind of, again, basic. I look at talent, and I watch it, I'm not a betting man, but boy, would I won a lot of money yesterday, because I just think the Cinderella, the mojo, the excitement over Washington, at the end of the day, they're just not, they don't compare. It's like how many Washington Commanders would break the starting lineup for the Eagles? I don't think, maybe one or two, maybe. So when you start looking at those kind of things and you match them up against these teams and you're like, wait a minute, they're superior at every position. It's going to be a different case with Kansas City, but I just think this team is built from the lines in. We know that, and that's extraordinary to begin with, where you have top 5 offensive and defensive lines, maybe top 3, maybe top 2, maybe top 1. And then you build around that. It's always been the way they've done it here, and I think that's a testament. And listen, I've talked about Howie before. He gives them a competitive advantage, and he does it in a couple different ways. One, he comes from the background I come from. It's a business, it's a financial, it's a negotiating background. And when you can leverage that background into favorable deals both with agents on players, but more importantly with teams on trades and maneuvering, that's a real advantage. What he's done with maneuvering around the draft and draft picks and also leveraging some really good deals, that has really been a competitive advantage for them. Now, it caused some disgruntledness with Reddick because he was making so much less than top pass rushers. So he moved that problem out. And sometimes you just have to do that. So I'm just a fan.
We're speaking with Andrew Brandt, the executive director of the Murad Center at Villanova, and his newsletter, mysunday7.com. I want to ask you about something we were talking about before the season because you know about these dynamics. He made sure he paid the left tackle. He paid his both wide receivers. Saquon obviously got paid. Jalen Hurts already got paid. Is it easier, in your opinion, to get buy-in on certain systems and get things to work when the general manager takes care of a lot of the money ahead of time? Because basically you look around, everybody that the Eagles needed to get paid on the offensive side of the ball got paid this offseason or the offseason before, and it seemed like that didn't come up at all year. Does that play a role in a team's success?
I think it does, and I mentioned the Reddick. That was going to be an issue, and they moved him out, and he continued to be an issue, but for another team. Yeah, I think addressing, the one thing that started by Joe Banner way back was that addressing guys early in their contracts, making sure we never get to places where you're looking at free agency status for your best players. You're going to have to sort of grovel at the leverage point that players have in free agency. That's always been a tradition with the Eagles. They've done a good job of that. And I think from the cap point of view, there was a clear feeling here that extraordinary talent on the offensive side. And with Cox retiring on the defensive side, you could go younger there, develop young players, and, of course, what they did in the secondary with the draft. So I just think it's picking spots where you're going to allocate resources and then picking spots where you're going to draft and develop. And again, having lightning strike with someone like Baum for a low contract that just plays light years ahead of that contract, it's all worked out. And I know people, like I said in my tweet, people can get bumpy about this team. Because, listen, I watch them all the time, too. Listen, they can look somewhat disinterested. They can look somewhat apathetic. They can look messy. But when you have that in reserve, that talent can eventually rule out. I just think if they put it together, this is a dominant team.
All right, when you look at this dominant team, obviously you have great coordinators. What is your thought on like a Nick Serianni not being up for a Coach of the Year?
Yeah, I just think there's too much negativity about him. I get it. People don't like coaches being demonstrative and acting like, in some way, acting like a fan. But it doesn't happen without him. He is there for a reason. I mean, he is overseeing a team that hasn't lost since whenever for a reason. He's not just sitting in a seat and everyone else is doing the work. So I don't know the intricacies, but there are a lot of coaches that turn over play calling and coordination to the coordinators. And we don't hear about them that they're just sitting around doing nothing. For some reason we do it with Serianni. I think that's unfair. And listen, there are some coaches that are flatliners. I think Andy is one of those. And some coaches that wear it on their sleeve. And to me, I just see this guy as a force that is able to motivate and is able to always have his players back. And I just thought it was interesting in his interview at the podium last night, right away, just all about Jalen. Like, he didn't have to be asked. That was his go-to. Because I think Jalen's been treated really unfairly. I mean, all that guy does is win. So I guess people have in their notion, this is how a coach is supposed to look, and this is how a quarterback is supposed to look. And again, I'll just say this about Jalen again. I just continue to be amazed that this guy was drafted to be a cheap backup for a guy who just got a $180 million contract named Wentz. It's just amazing. I mean, that's why he was drafted. Because they didn't want to have Nick Foles. They didn't want to have a $20 million backup. And they thought they'd go with this guy, and look what he's become.
Really amazing stuff, Andrew. You always make us smarter about football. People should go to the newsletter, mysunday7.com. We really appreciate you giving us some insight into how things go, and hopefully we talk to you soon.
Yeah, go Birds, as they say.
Yes, sir. Go Birds. Thanks so much. That was Andrew Brandt, former NFL executive. MySunday7.com is his newsletter, executive director at the Murad Center at Villanova.
I love how he says, as they say.
As they say. But my favorite thing he said about Serianni, the whole time, he gave us a lot right there. It doesn't happen without him.
Yeah.
Plain and simple with Nick Serianni. It doesn't happen without him.
And by the way, I feel that way now.
Me too.
And that's, for the beginning of the season, I probably wouldn't be saying that.
I wouldn't have said it.
Week 4, I'm definitely not saying it.
Heck no, when he was yelling at fans at the Browns, you can criticize.
Which was 6? Week
yeah,
6?
But when you get to this, you still criticize it. At this point, you become a hater.
Yeah, you got to drop it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate it. If you want more of this content, make sure you like and subscribe. And you can do that kind of over here if you want more of the best show ever.